I can't not laugh every time he does it.
All right. We're live. This is The Good Fight with attorneys Steve and Josh. All right, we got a hot one tonight. We got our very good friend Joseph Henein, attorney at law. Joseph, how long have I known you for now?
It's probably been about maybe 8 years or so.
8 years, wow. Fantastic. It's great. It's 8 years, not enough. I feel like I've known you my whole life, my friend.
Yeah, same here, man. Same here.
Especially because our offices are right next to each other.
And I think at one point we were in the same building.
Were we? Oh, yeah. You're right. I was a tenant at the atrium.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
One could make the case maybe that you were my landlord, or no? I get your dad.
Indirectly.
Yeah. Well, you weren't an attorney back then.
No, that was prior.
Yeah. When did you tell us? By the way, can't forget about Josh.
Hey there.
How you doing?
I just realized I think I should get like a Bob Barker mic.
Ooh.
I think.
Is that the one with like real skinny pole? Yeah, Rode. I believe Rode makes some of those. I mean, you can buy them anywhere.
I think I should get one of those.
You should.
I should get one of those.
You should.
Yeah, Joseph, tell us about yourself.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Joseph.
All right, so my name is Joseph Henein. I've been an attorney for going on 5 years now, and primarily focusing on estate planning, probate, living trust, some asset protection, and I've been in that field. I chose that field just because it always interests me what happens to one's asset, how people inherit property, mainly because from where we're from back in Egypt, they basically can inherit the property just because of the fact that you're that person's son or daughter, depending on the family, and you just kind of get it. In our culture, a lot of the people that I've been dealing with have thought to be the same here. So it's been interesting educating some of the people that weren't born here like myself, and letting them know that in the U.S. it's a little bit different. So it was kind of a little bit of a transition, and then and educating them. So I did some seminars. I've done just anywhere from homeowners associations, church meetings, things like that.
So I'm confused because what you just described sounds to me like the U.S. system. No, I mean inheritance.
Well, not necessarily.
No,
it's so in other countries it's based on the fact of based on the relationship, not necessarily going through the probate, proving who you are, having the courts handling everything. It's just, okay, well, this is my dad's property and I should be able to get the deed. And
so avoiding courts.
Right. Well, so I just want to get the record straight here. In Egypt, is there even a way to do that? Is there a way to change your inheritance or the person that's inheriting?
There is. They do have wills and like we would here, except that a lot of times people don't go to the extra steps in preparing a will or preparing a trust because the laws there allow you to inherit because my father or my mother owned it and I'm the next of kin. And they basically just can inherit it without having to go through the whole probate system like you would here, or having to create a living trust in order to pass that property down.
Okay.
So how long have you been in the States?
I was born in the States.
You were born in the States?
I
thought you said you weren't born in the States.
No. I was saying a lot of the clients that I've dealt with in the past have been from different countries, and primarily from Egypt. So they have always came thinking that I just want to make sure that it goes to them, thinking that they don't have to do much.
Well, I forgot to mention that today's topic is called To Trust or Not to Trust. And so, Josh and I actually have a fascination in learning, beyond what we learned in law school. Josh finished law school more recently than I did. But, I think that Josh helped me out here. But as part of what you and now I have referred to as sort of a web of services that we can offer clients, right? Because we do family law, and we do have a lot of clients who approach us to do a living trust or a will, and we have actually traditionally been referring everyone over to you, Joseph. But, when I find an interest in something, I want to know more about it. And that's kind of why you're here now talking to us. But tell us a little bit, Josh, about what you mean by this sort of web of services and how we can maybe help people.
Well, I think it's just basic business strategy, right? It's a little bit of economies of scale, meaning that, the more you do something, the cheaper it becomes. And when you have some consistencies between your disciplines, in this case, it would be between family law, trust and wills, and then even on the bankruptcy side, and personal injury, things become cheaper to do because you're doing them in all the different disciplines. Mm-hmm. And so the problem that people run into with diversification as far as disciplines in their business is that they're not related. And when they are related, it just makes more sense. I mean, if you just think of it logically and you take the business jargon out of it, it makes sense to do things that are connected, not only because you know them better, but because you have more to offer to your client. Yeah. You have a full service business, right? So let's take a personal injury example, right? If we are confident in estate planning and asset protection, like Joseph talked about, and you get a 7-figure settlement or a 7-figure verdict, it's not a good idea for your client just to go out there and spend all willy-nilly, right? Right. So now you have the tools and you have the option to sit down with your client and say, hey, look, this is something that we do as well. I think this is something that can benefit you tremendously. And the same thing goes with a family law case, right? If you have a family law case with substantial assets and post-divorce, they realize, just how important those assets are to them. They just fought so hard to keep them or keep them from the other side. What are they going to do to protect those in the future? Right. And I think that the idea behind a will and a trust is that, it gives you the ability to control the future is really what it does.
Yeah. So, Joseph, tell us a little bit about your bread and butter, so to speak. In other words, who are the people that come to you? Because the scenario that Josh just mentioned is, I don't know, maybe it is something that you see a lot, but, the personal injury context, someone who is going to settle a case or has settled a case, personal injury case, and comes into a large amount of money. But tell us about the flip side or the other scenarios where maybe they already have a bunch of money. Maybe it's not liquid, meaning maybe it's tied up into a house, but they want to think about the future. Maybe they have some health issues so tell us about the common people that come to you asking for your help.
Okay. So we've dealt with people who have multiple properties, and we've dealt with others who just have their husband, wife, one house, and their children. And the basic principle is that you're trying to protect that property. You're trying to make sure that the property passes to either the surviving spouse or the children or both, and in a way where it's the most cost effective. Now, to give you an example of someone who has multiple properties, probate now, they charge you, or they've been charging you based on a statutory fee. The statutory fee is a percentage of the value of the estate. Yeah. So just to give you a quick example, a $500,000 estate, and that's fair market value of a property. Okay. It costs the family about $26,000 in probate fees. Yeah. And that's based on their attorney's fees scale as well as the administrator fees. Obviously, most people want to try to avoid that. They create the living trust. They make sure that trust gets passed to their children without going into probate. Mm-hmm. And that's the premise of creating the trust and why people would need it.
You saying that probate costs a lot of money and requires court intervention? What are you saying?
Correct. Yes, probate does cost a lot of money. It's the more assets you have, the more your family will pay in probate.
Ooh. Generally speaking, I don't like the government getting involved in my affairs, right? But certainly there's also a cost component to this, right? So one could also, correct me if I'm wrong, think of it as an investment, right? I'm going to pay a lawyer right now a certain sum of money, and we'll get into that in a second, so that not I, because I'm going to be dead, but my family doesn't, or my estate doesn't incur all of these fees later because I didn't do a trust, right? Is that how it works?
That's correct. So depending on the type of trust you're doing, depending on what assets are involved, will determine the cost. But even a more complicated estate is not going to equal the amount that you're going to pay or your family will pay when you go into probate.
Okay. Is there a certain threshold that you see, like, should everybody be doing a trust? Someone that maybe doesn't own real property? Or do you see, like, okay, if you have one piece of property, whether there's equity or not, then it's advisable to do a trust? But is there a certain threshold where after a certain point, it's like, okay, you know what? You should really consider a trust.
So I think once you purchase any property, a real property, then I believe you should have a trust at that point. Because if you just have your 401k, your life insurance, your savings account or checking account, there are other ways through beneficiaries that you can make sure that those assets are passed to people that you designate without having to create a living trust. However, when you own real property, whether it's one house, whether it's paid off, or whether there's a mortgage on the property, you still need to have a trust to make sure that that property passes on to your heirs or your spouse or children or whoever it may be.
So what about a situation where husband, wife, no kids? Is that but they have a house? Is that a situation where you still need a trust?
So I would say yes, because it's typical for husband and wife to travel together, whether it's in car, an airplane, train, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
So if there is a common accident, they both pass away, then that property will end up in probate.
Yeah.
And it's best for them to decide together what they want to happen. Say their decision is not to have children, or maybe they don't want children, whatever the reason may be, to at least take action and make a decision as to where their estate's going to end up.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
So if one of the objectives is to avoid court altogether, right, by doing a trust, do you see yourself in the courtroom a lot because of that fact?
So I do probate as well. And in probate, yes, you are in the courtroom. You do have to go through the procedural hearings. There is some litigation in probate. So if there is litigation, obviously that ends up in court. If you're doing the transactional side, which is the living trust, then it doesn't require that you make any court appearances or anything for the living trust part. It's the probate side that.
And so tell us a little bit about a common situation where you see cases that do end up in court. So is it because the person did not have a trust and they had a lot of assets and so now it's going through probate? Or do you also see situations where there is a living trust and for some reason it still ends up in litigation?
So we've seen both. We've seen situations where the surviving parent did not create a trust, did not create a will, and ended up passing away.
That necessarily has to go to probate, correct?
Correct. So,
well, if there's enough money involved.
If there's a property, correct, it will go to probate.
Okay.
If there's a property with that, there's no surviving owners.
Okay.
So if it's joint tenancy, it goes to the surviving owner.
Mm.
If I own a property by myself, I pass away, that property will go into probate.
I see. That could get real messy,
Correct.
I would imagine.
Correct. So we've seen it where there's no trust. It ends up in probate. The kids then will obviously fight over, and some fight and some don't.
Some don't.
But sometimes they do, and they want to get what's theirs. And sometimes people feel that they're entitled to more.
Yeah.
We've had a situation where there were two brothers. They did have a trust, except that the brothers did not agree. One brother did not agree on how the dad divided the assets.
Okay.
He felt that it should have been more to him and less to the other brother.
I see.
So it ended up in litigation.
Uh-huh.
We saw it all the way through. However, the courts held that the trust was valid and ended up dividing it 50-50 as the trust stated.
There was not a no contest clause?
There was not.
Ooh.
It was an older trust. I'm not sure who drafted it, but it was an older trust. And
what is a no contest clause?
the no contest clause basically states if there's, for example, two siblings, one sibling wants to contest it for just because he feels he or she should get more money for whatever reason.
Yeah.
There's no good faith to contest the trust. He could potentially lose the entire share.
Playing
So
with Russian roulette there. Or
Is that the rule in California? It just needs to be reasonable.
There needs to be a good faith contest.
Good faith contest.
Yeah.
What constitutes good faith?
So, for example, if there's sometimes two brothers, the trustee is acting, doing whatever he needs to do, and the beneficiary feels that the trustee is somehow abusing his power
outside their discretion.
Outside their discretion, or maybe paying himself a high salary or paying himself too much, something along those lines where there's reason to dispute it.
Got it.
Interesting. And
I find it fascinating. I think it's so mathematical.
Yeah.
Like it just reminds me so much of an equation. And I think in a field of law where everything is so gray, there's at least a small sense of black and white.
You mean in the law in general?
Yeah.
And this is one of those. Yeah. Would you agree with that position, Joseph?
I do, because you're able to take control of your estate. You're able to take control of your assets. You're able to tell people, this is how I want my property to be divided.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go to probate, the government decides what happens. So if you have no will, no trust, it gets into what's called intestate succession. And that basically, there's an order of who inherits the property.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I was going to say, like, if cases, when cases usually go to trial, it's because there's some factual issue that needs to be decided by a particular trier of fact. Now, the trier of fact sometimes is the jury, a jury of 12 people. Sometimes it's the court. And I think in probate, it's the court.
Correct.
But tell me a little bit about when there's an occasion for a factual issue to be determined and therefore maybe is not black and white.
Well, let me clarify what I mean by black and white. I think that a trust, right, is your ability to make it black and white. It's your ability to eliminate the gray areas, right? If it's done properly. Yeah. I mean, if it's not done properly, you're just creating more gray area.
So an example would be if someone creates a trust and they're in an older age, someone can say, well, they're on this sort of medication, dementia, they have this,
mental
they have
capacity.
Capacity.
Capacity is the big one.
Duress, undue influence.
A common one, correct. A common one is the parents get older, one of the children move into the parents' house, and then the parents pass, and all of a sudden everything is going to that person that was living there.
Got it.
Now, was that duress or not? So then there's argument, or were they thankful that they, put their life aside and came and helped?
Right. So that's an example of when there is a trust and there's still that gray area because of things that were subsequent to that trust being created.
Interesting.
It's typically if you're disinheriting someone, give someone a reason to want to fight for it.
There's an expression, and I'm paraphrasing here, but that, at least in America, that most of the country's wealth is rooted in real estate, in real property, right? And so I think for that reason alone, earlier I talked about a threshold requirement, whether there was or isn't, but certainly I think that if anyone has, and I think you answered this, if someone has real estate, they need a trust. They should get a trust, whether there's equity, whether there isn't, just because of how wealth in this country is very important, and how wealth gets distributed after one's death.
Correct. I would agree, because what some people that come to me, they've stated, well, all I have is one house and I just wanted to go to my two children. Why don't I just transfer that property to them now while I'm alive? And I don't have to set up a trust. I know that they get it and I'm done.
Well, tell us why that would be a bad idea, Joseph.
So, number one reason, you're transferring legal ownership, so they could evict you, but assume that they're...
Well, yeah, I mean, they could...
Hey, mom and dad.
Let's assume they're good kids. They're not going to evict you. The other thing is if they're in a car accident and they don't have sufficient insurance, someone wants to file a claim against them. You guys would know about that.
Protect your assets.
Another example is if you have a business and they have a tax audit, or they have some sort of wage garnishment or liens or something that's placed on the property. And the most obvious one is for tax reasons. So there's capital gain taxes that if you receive a gift of property, say the value is worth $500,000, and you receive that as a gift, then you come and sell it, you have to pay taxes on that gift.
Okay.
Whereas if you inherit property, you get the step up in the capital gains taxes.
Interesting.
So you'll receive the property and the value on the date of death.
So really what I'm hearing from every angle is that you decrease your chance of liability.
Correct.
Whether it be tax liability, personal liability, whatever it is, you're decreasing that by putting the property in a trust.
Correct.
And, I just think, you spend so much of your time and effort trying to buy these properties, right? For the most part, most people, they own 1-2 properties, whatever it is. The amount of time and effort that went into earning that property, it just makes no sense not to protect it.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all about protection. In a good sense, not in the sense that you normally would imagine. Well, I updated this machine to include a new sound effect, and I was trying to find the opportunity to use it. So I'm going to make something up here, but the idea for trust, I believe, is one of the primary motivating factors is so that it doesn't go to court and you don't have to hear this. Right? Because that costs a lot of money, does it not? Going to court?
It does.
All right. Well, we've basically run out of time. We've passed our 20-minute mark. We like to keep them short and concise, but we do appreciate you, Joseph.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Coming over.
You have any last words?
Walking over.
I think get your trust done. You own a house, get your trust.
Get your trust done. All right. Well, Joseph is next door to us, so if you want to come in, and we'll walk you right over, and we'll put you in some good hands here. So anyway, thanks again, Joseph, for coming. You have joined us on The Good Fight, and wish you much success in your practice and your new family.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And now that it's public, hello, Mr. Joshua Genzik is going to be a father too.
Nice. Congrats.
All right? Please don't tear up. It's too late for that. Thanks for listening, everybody.
It's